Well, welcome to our third and final seminar of this series. This one is often the one that we have kind of the least attendance for because it can be a very difficult discussion to have. And so I really appreciate you all kind of seeing it through and coming and spending tonight with us. If you don't know already, I think I've said it a few times, my name's Erin. I'm the Clinic Support Service Associate Director of the Argus Institute, which is funny enough, I forgot to put on this slide. So hopefully you grabbed a card. But I know I spoke of what the Argus Institute is on the first day. You know, it's the client support service within the VTH. So also know that please take the resources that were outside, the cards, the pamphlets, which are called Making Decisions. And if you all ever find yourself in need of someone to support you, to talk things through or help you, then please don't hesitate to reach out. Know that you are more than welcome to do that. So that said, just a few things to go over. Sorry, trying to move this. Again, the food, please enjoy the food. Eat as much as you would like. There's so much of it. If you didn't know or remember from before, the restrooms, if you need those, are just out the door to the right, men's and ladies. We are going to do questions a little differently this time, just to kind of keep with the flow of the conversation of the information. I have built into the seminar two different slide options for us to pause and have questions. So if you have questions at that time, then we should have time to answer a few. There will also be time at the very end. So just wanted to give you that opportunity. If in that moment around that topic you have a question or comment, then we can address it then. And then also recognizing that this is a very personal and can be a very charged discussion and emotionally charged things to think about. And so just, I guess, in respect of those around you who may be in a different place emotionally, who may be triggered easily by hearing tales or experiences, I would actually encourage you to withhold sharing too much information of your own experiences. I just want to be really mindful of everyone's process and everyone's place and where they are tonight in attending this talk. And so I know that we all bring our own personal histories into this room, and it's natural to want to share those. And perhaps it's an opportunity to afterwards, could be a time to think about that. That said, I want to introduce my colleagues. This is Lisa Muska. She is one of our counselors on staff with the Argus Institute. Tonight, she's going to be manning the microphone during the question sections. And the director of the Argus Institute is Maria Gore. She will be managing the microphone for online questions as well as probably this half, because Lisa's going to run her legs off on this side. So. All right, we can go ahead and get started. Lifelong animal mom, born into a family of 3 cats and kind of maintained that number forever. I've had dogs, horses, lizards, all kinds of critters throughout my life. So I understand the connection kind of to animals of all sizes. I worked in the veterinary field as an assistant for 10 years prior to going back to school to become a social worker. But for me, it was just a natural place to be. I love the human-animal bond. I love the relationship people have with their pets. And it really touches my heart to be able to stand with someone as they're going through a hard time and just help them in whatever way I can. I've been with Argus since 2007 and have moved, started off as a counselor, and now I help run the service. So love to stay with this. This is my dream place to be. And then I just have a note that I have loved and lost many. I've learned from each and every one of my pets, and that's something I hope that you are doing as well, learning from each thing that they teach us. Tonight, I want to empower you. My hope is that in having these conversations, I recognize that they can be very difficult. They can be hard to open up yourself to some of the things that we talk about, to an impending loss. But in doing so and having these conversations, the point of tonight is to gather some information, to not delve into the emotional side of it, but to start to ready you for this experience whenever it may come. Hopefully not too soon, but whenever that does happen, I hope for you to have some of the tools ready to help you move through that experience in a way that can be very helpful to you. I do recognize that all of us are at different stages in our lives with our pets, in their lives. And so some of the things we may talk about may be emotionally triggering. And please, if you find yourself being triggered, if you want to take some space, take some time, then that is fine. I will not ask why you're stepping out of the room. I want you to advocate for yourself and do what you need to do through tonight, just to help you kind of gather this information. Prioritize yourself. So often we have a hard time doing that, and so I want to encourage you to do that tonight. Now, as your pets age, it's really important to keep you in mind. We put so much energy and love into caring for our pets and all of the things that go into that caregiving. But it's so important to recognize that you need care too. And so with an aging pet, allowing yourself to have some breaks, asking for help when needed. It can be exhausting if you have a pet that requires medications multiple times a day, or you're getting up through the night. And figuring out, okay, well, how can I make some alterations to where I can have some help with this? I'm not becoming emotionally exhausted. This isn't physically exhausting me or injuring me even. So asking for support. Also allowing for emotions. Sometimes we get so caught up in the doing that we forget the feeling part of things, or we just don't want to open ourselves up to the feeling side yet. And that's okay. When you're ready, I think it's very important to do that, just even through this stage of an aging pet, to recognize, hey, some of these things are good to think about, and then it hurts. And if I allow myself to express these emotions, then they're not going to be so overwhelming when that time comes. You're going to have already given them some time and some attention. Anticipatory grief is grief that we feel when we are facing an impending loss. It actually has a term. It can be a journey in itself. And so recognizing that anticipatory grief happens. It is okay if you receive a diagnosis and you start to grieve right then, because that's natural. Because you start to think about what that diagnosis may mean. You start to think about that time may be now limited. There are parameters now. It's not just a forever perspective. And in doing so, anticipatory grief can be a kind of a varied journey. And why I have written to experience anticipatory grief with intention is that if you let it happen and don't mind it, then it can be quite overwhelming. The anxiety of watching someone, of assessing them all the time, of waiting for changes, of just being fully attentive 150% of the time can be very exhausting. And it can be very, like I said, anxiety causing for you to continually assess. My concern is when you do that, then you miss out on the beautiful moments that you're spending with your pet. And so recognizing that, yes, I'm grieving because my pet may not be here for much longer or for as long as I expected or had hoped. And it's okay to grieve. I can feel the feelings and I can be present. And I don't have to be anxious or live with the anxiety of this impending loss, but rather embrace that grief to help you through it. The last one on that slide actually said to be kind. And so please be kind to yourself as you're experiencing anticipatory grief, to allow yourself a little extra tenderness. Tonight, because we're talking about end-of-life situations, there are many reasons why you may be assessing quality of life for a pet. Some of these are a chronic deterioration, a terminal illness, Other causes may be because of a traumatic event or behavioral circumstances. And these may be other reasons that someone may be facing a quality of life assessment or an end of life decision. For the purpose of tonight, given that this seminar series is around aging pets, we're going to focus primarily on the terminal and chronic declines. I just wanted to recognize that these, our discussion tonight still does apply to these other circumstances. So when we talk about qualities of living, like living is the key word there, right? That is what our babies do. They live in each moment, right? So we want to help them protect that. So one way to do that is to take inventory of what defines your pet. I have on my picture earlier, that is my giant Muppet of a dog. His name is Dunkel. And one thing that defines him is he's 5, and every day I come home from work, I mean, it's the same thing every single day. I'm always going to come home from work. He loses his mind. He bounces and dances and stands on his hind leg and barks. He has a really, really loud bark. And even, you know, after a long day, it may not be the thing I really want to hear, but at the same time, I welcome it. And so in terms of how I would define Dunkel, it's that excitement. He wants to welcome me like, oh my gosh, I've been gone for 100 years apparently, but it's, you know, 8 hours. And that defines him, that engagement. And so in thinking about your own pets, think about them personally and identify those things that really define them as a being. Another thing to look at is, what does an ideal day look like now? So if we're not perhaps dealing with an illness, or we're not in the throes of a decline, then now is a good time to assess, all right, what are our normal activities? What does it look like? What are our experiences like? How does my pet experience them? And start to kind of evaluate all of those little minutiae that makes your animal enjoy every day with you. And so identifying their ideal day. Sometimes it may be different than our ideal day. If you're like, well, they really want to go for a 5-mile walk, you know, and we may not be able to do that because it snowed 18 inches, but figuring out what that looks like for your pet. And the other thing is also to allow some flexibility. You know, if your dog is that 5-mile-a-walk dog, but as we start to age, we may reduce it. Maybe it's only 1 mile, but they still enjoy it, then that's okay, right? Allowing for that flexibility as age maybe reduces some abilities, but assessing that the definition of them is still within that activity. So just allowing that. And assessing kind of, these are some ways to assess the quality in the life. So not, you know, as much the living, what we were just talking about, but actually within their life. I will say there are some, especially when you're dealing with an illness, there are some non-negotiables I encourage you to think about. That would be eating, drinking, eliminating, mobility. These are some major ones to consider, and in regards to maintenance of life, okay? So you can identify those for your pet and your circumstance. At the same time, some of these may be some qualities that we define. If my dog wasn't able to walk around, if he's a 90-pound dog, I wouldn't be able to lift him and move him. And so a non-negotiable for me is his mobility. Like, and that's standing. He's doing very well. He's very healthy. And I already know that that's on my list. And so there may be some parameters that you personally have and have to set into that list of non-negotiables that you're like, if this begins, then I know that we're in this list. Another thing is to define suffering for your pet. Often when we're thinking about assessing quality of life, we want to think about, I hear a lot of times, well, I don't want any pain or suffering. And sometimes we bunch those together. You know, pain may be suffering, absolutely, and suffering may be much more. And so thinking about your pet personally, identifying what suffering may mean to that individual, it can be really important. Now, within a family, you all may have different perspectives of really all of these. And so if you have a family system that this pet is within, allowing everyone to have that voice and to have some ideas to share those thoughts can be very helpful. Utilizing a quality list, and so that would be the things that really define your pet. You know, having that kind of in writing to say, okay, these are the things I remember I'm looking for. Often as our pets age, we kind of put on our rose-colored glasses and we're like, no, they're good, they're fine. We're like, oh, this was a tough day, but yesterday I think was okay. And so we start to, you know, our memories may fade a little bit. And so sometimes it can be really helpful to have that quality list in writing. It also allows us to track them. And so if you have a calendar, and this can be very simple, right? If you have a paper calendar, you know, just marking on it, you know, was this a good day? Was this a bad day? We had lots of qualities today. We didn't have a lot of quality or enjoyment of today. And so keeping track of that is an objective way of following a quality of life assessment. Also asking for help. This can be from, I thought you mentioned this within the family system, but it can also be people who don't see the animal every day and may notice changes a little bit brighter than you may notice if you're just seeing these small changes frequently. And so asking your neighbors, asking your friends, asking your asking your veterinarian for their input on what they're observing. There's also some, and we will email these to you, some quality of life assessment scales, again, to give a bit more objective way to, I mean, it's still subjective because you're writing it in there, but a way to monitor the maintenance of quality in their lives. Like I said, we will email these to you when we email the slideshow. Often, I think we get very, like I said earlier, we get very wrapped up in the caregiving and the efforts for that, that sometimes we forget to look inward and to assess ourselves. And I do encourage you, as you're assessing quality of life for your pets, to continually assess your own quality of life as well. Because if your quality of life begins to suffer, then that will impact in a ripple effect. Not that it would be harmful to your pet, but it could be harmful to the time that you have with your pet and impede that enjoyment. So thinking about how your quality of life is impacted, how it is impacting you emotionally, mentally, physically. If you're like me and you have a 90-pound dog and you're having to hoist them up and move them or clean them, then that can be physically detrimental, right? And if you hurt your back, what will happen if something else happens, that you can't do this? So just being mindful of these, keeping an assessment of yourself. And so that way you're not giving too much of yourself away and you're creating that balance to where you can care for yourself and care for your pet just as you want to. Another thought is identifying regrets. As we're watching our pets age, then we start to think of these things. We start to think about quality days. We start to think about, well, what defines them? And as we move forward, if we get to an end of life decision, sometimes we're still asking ourselves, how will I know? And it's still very gray. If you feel yourself in that place, then I encourage you to take a moment and a bit of a sideways approach to this, to say, what do I want to avoid? What would I regret my pet experiencing? What would I regret witnessing my pet experience? And sometimes when we talk about regrets or things we want to avoid, that maybe stand out a lot clearer than if we're like, what am I looking for? What signs that it's time, but rather taking that sideways approach. So I just encourage you to think about this. Regret weighs heavily on us after a loss. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's why I bring it up now, kind of in this phase of assessment. One thing I love to encourage families to do as pets age is to create a bucket list. Does everyone know what a bucket list is? Have you heard that phrase before? To create a bucket list for your pets is really fun because you get to think outside the box and you get to enjoy it from their perspective. And it may not be really as much fun for you if it's really just walking slowly around the entire park and sniffing, but that may be the bucket list. So thinking about making these memories with your pet, making these memories and accomplishing these bucket list items. And they're, I mean, it can be the grand ones, right? Like going to the beach. If you want your animal to experience the beach, maybe if you have a cat, it will look a little different. But if you have a dog, maybe, although I have known cats that have traveled quite far. But even the little ones, a bucket list may be like, hey, we're going to sit down and watch this really sappy movie and I'm going to cry and I'm going to hug you and this is going to be our moment. And that may be the item on your list, right? So you kind of vary whatever you want to put on that list, but to think about those, to document those, to take videos, to take pictures, to record it. So you're creating these memories and you can also visually go back to them. All right, you can pause for just a second. Just wanted to open up in case there were any questions or thoughts that anyone wanted to share. Okay, are there any on the chat? All right, great. Well, we'll move on. Is everyone in a place for us to continue? All right. So now we're going into a little bit deeper discussion, right? This may be triggering, so just to be aware of that and taking care of yourself through this. I encourage you to start thinking of these things early, even when your animal is not sick. It's like I have the metaphor up here. It's like trying on a very thick coat in the summer. You're like, this is really uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I don't like this. Okay, it fits. The sleeves are the right length. It's the right length. I'm going to take it off, right? You identify it. It'll work. You got it, and then you can take that off. And so just putting yourself into that, to try on those ideas, to come up with your plans, and then you can set that aside. And you can just start to be in the moment with your animals as you have been. Our animals pass in different ways. So from, like I said, we're in regards to a terminal or a chronic disease, the options could be natural death or euthanasia. So in regards to a natural death, which some families will choose based on their belief system, their experiences, it's a very personal choice, but I wanted to absolutely address it. I think it's really important to educate yourself about what to expect from the disease process that your pet is experiencing. If it's a physical decline, if it's a disease like a cancer or a heart disease, things like that, to talk with your doctor about what will this look like? What rate will this occur? What will it be like for my animal? So asking all those questions, what can I expect from this during this period? And see how you feel about the answers. With a natural death, then a palliative care approach like a hospice can be started. In town, there are hospice groups that can come to your house and provide this. Sometimes your veterinarian will offer such care. And so again, this is a conversation to have with them. What would palliative care look like for your animal? And then also recognize perhaps the limitations of a natural dying process. It is a bit unpredictable, right? And so if your goals are to be with your pet when they pass, to be doing a certain activity, a prayer, a talk, saying things to them, petting them, whatever that may be, think if this will be accomplishable with a natural dying process. And the reason I bring this up is I have worked with lots of families that have chosen this route, and for many families, it's beautiful, and it's at the pace that they are comfortable with, and it's worked out well. For other families, they've been out of the house or in the shower when their pet passes, and it's very traumatic for them. And so I bring this up not to traumatize you, but just to encourage you to think about all of the dynamics around what this may look like, and just to make sure that you're okay with that. Again, it comes back to evaluating possible regrets. Would you regret if you were not present? Would you regret if there was a long duration? What regrets would they be? And those are very personal to identify, but I encourage you to spend some time thinking about them if a natural dying process would be your wish. Also, identifying supportive resources. So if there is a crisis, if the duration extends longer than you expected, what is your plan? Who can support you? Who is available? So identifying all that information ahead of time, ahead of the need for that information, is really good to have at the ready. Another method that a pet may pass is through euthanasia. And I won't ask who has experienced euthanasia. I will just assume that many in this room have, or have made this choice. Euthanasia is defined as the hastening of a death of a patient to prevent further suffering. I don't know if you guys are aware, if you break it down to the Greek root words, eu and thanatos, it means good death. And so when we say euthanasia, we're saying that our goal is a good death. Many of us may be familiar with what a challenging death may look like, either personally or from other people, of a human family member or a personal loss that we've experienced. And so sometimes that guides us into saying, okay, well, I like this definition. I think I may examine this as an option. Other families that I work with are hesitant to choose euthanasia because of the dialogue they have in their head that says, I'm giving up on my pet. I'm making the decision to kill my pet by choosing euthanasia. And I will challenge that, because that is not at all what you're doing. If you're thinking of this decision, it is the most selfless decision that you make for pets, because it sacrifices your own heart for them to find peace. You sacrifice a lot for your animals. And so in choosing this, if you find yourself thinking those thoughts, then I encourage you to take a step back and say, hold on, what really is ending my pet's life? What disease is taking over? What condition is causing this to happen? What is my role in this and making this decision? Euthanasia is another medical option, just like treatment has been, just like perhaps chemo, perhaps surgery. When we have a suffering that is occurring, then this would be an appropriate medical option if it aligns with your wishes. With euthanasia, I think this last line speaks to it. We go so long focusing on protecting their quality of life that in making this decision, you are actually choosing to protect their quality of dying. And that can mean a lot if you can frame it that way in embracing this, again, if it aligns with your wishes. So, thinking about goodbye. I know that this is hard. There's lots of tears out there, and I apologize. If you need Kleenex, wave Maria down. She has some extras. And thank you all for hanging with me on this. So while your pets are doing well and you're loving on them and hugging them, think about what that ideal final day may look like, right? Think about what you want that to imagine that to look like. Who will be there? Where will it be? Will it be at your house? Will it be at a clinic? Will it be at a special location? What special items do you want to have present? You know, is there a special toy or a bed or a blanket? And then also recognizing what doctor will help assist you through this. And in thinking of some of these, they may start to set some parameters around that decision. If you have a favorite doctor, they may only work certain days, or they may be unavailable on other days. So getting this information as you're starting to think about this can be very helpful. One thing to also think about is how to have your pet's body cared for after they're gone. Some options may be a burial, either on your property, if it's allowed, in a pet cemetery. Some options may be cremation. So there's different kind of things to think about what feels right to you and to the family of your pet. That way, if you have questions about those, then you can ask. You can gather that information and be ready when you have to make that decision. And so just continuing to think about what is important to me on these days. One thing that we often do at the hospital is we have a giant jar for dogs mainly, of Reese's cups, because you know, dogs can't get chocolate throughout their lives. And if they come in and they still want to eat, what better treat than chocolate and peanut butter? And so we always give them something special, like the forbidden, treats. And for some families, it just means so much, like, oh my gosh, they've always wanted to eat the chocolate and now they get to. What will be uplifting to you? Like, is it Big Mac time? Is it can of tuna time? Is it, brushing? If your cat likes to be brushed, have that brush with you. All those little special things think about to incorporate into that day. The reason that we're talking about this is to create this perfect day, create this plan A that you are comfortable going back to in your memories, that it is a part of a loving history with you and your pet, that you can come back to and tell stories of and say how they ate all the Reese's cups, and then licked you, and it was very chocolatey, make those memories, right? So that would be your plan A. At the same time, because some diseases are unpredictable in terms of when they emerge, when they cause a decline, I encourage you also to think about plan B. So for emergent situations, for a sudden decline, a weekend, it's always on the weekends, right? But to identify, okay, in emergency, where will I go? Who will I call? Who do I want with me? How will I get there? What will this look like? Even having written down, what will I ask for? If I want music played, okay, I'm going to bring my phone. Don't start until I play this music. Everything like that can still be in an emergent situation, but to have that at the ready, so that way, when you're dealing with that emotionally and just the hurriedness of that experience, you will have that, and you'll be able to, again, create as much of plan A into plan B as possible. And you won't have to think as strongly because you'll already have the information of where you're going, who you're calling. And that can be very helpful, so that way you can stay as present with your animal as possible. And to me, that's one of the most important things. All right, I just want to pause for a second. If anyone has any questions, or just to allow you to take a breath, because I know that it is very hard to try on these ideas. I appreciate you being willing to. Any comments?
We've got a couple online.
Okay.
First one is it possible to accompany the body of our pet if cremation is chosen?
Mhm. I can speak to the crematoriums locally. They do allow that. It is nice if you can have someone give them a notification that you are coming, so that way they can prepare and they know that you're going to be arriving. It would also be a good conversation to reach out to them at this stage and ask, what would that look like? What is your time frame? What are your hours? When are you open? When can I come? More information to gather empowers you even more to be ready whenever that day comes. Is that it? Oh, wait, here, we'll give you the mic. So wait, hold on just a sec. The online people can't hear you without the mic.
If you plan on a euthanasia at home,
Mhm.
should your other pets be around or not?
That's a great question. I'm asked that quite often. I've spoken to behaviorists about that. And it's kind of a mixed bag, right? It really depends on the pets. It depends on their bond. It depends on what you want that to look like. If you're saying goodbye to an elderly dog and you have an 8-month-old puppy that's very rambunctious, how will that affect your experience of your time with saying goodbye? Is there some flexibility that can be given? Maybe your puppy isn't present, but can come in afterwards when you're ready. So kind of thinking about all the different possibilities. The behaviorists talk about, highly bonded pets. It's not a bad idea to allow them to see the deceased pet. There's no really known understanding if it makes a difference for them or not. What we do know is that dogs and pets, not just dogs, cats too, often know before we do that a disease is occurring within their sibling. And, kind of in hindsight, we may be like, yeah, I noticed that he was really crowding him a lot, or he was grooming him a lot, or he's been giving him extra attention, or he's been separating from him. So we see that too. So it's really up to you. I think it's whatever will make you feel most comfortable in that moment and what will allow you to have the most ideal, peaceful moment as possible. If it's involving the other animals, then that's fine, because that may be also supportive for you emotionally to have them there. If it doesn't, then that's okay too. I had worked with a family that brought all 3 dogs to say goodbye to the one that we were saying goodbye to, and they brought their cat. And the 3 dogs were actually very involved, and they just kind of laid down and, they were calm. The cat sat in the windowsill and looked outside the entire time. So cats are their unique little beings, so we know that. But I think it's just that we just have to let them do what they want, what they need to do in those moments, It's a great question. I hear that a lot. Any other comments?
I had a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I don't know how, but I can hear you.
It is follow up to what you just mentioned. I've euthanized 5 dogs and 2 with cancer, and it never gets any easier. And that 2 things. It is one of life's experiences, and it's hard for me. Like, it's your telling and sharing with us your work experience and life experiences. And yet I've had those experiences, and no one's is going to be the same, because no one has the same relationship with that animal and that being and that life experience. And so one of the things that was devastating to me the first time I euthanized the first dog is walking out holding the leash and the collar in my hand. And I don't know, you walk in or carry in the dog or pet, and I don't know, I just lost it walking out with the leash and the collar.
Yeah.
And and for some reason that stick with me like 5 times over.
Mhm.
And so that was, it's just like one of life experiences. And so when the other 4 dogs, and one of them was not mine, it was a housemate's dog, but I asked that person, can I bring the other dog in with me? And he's like, absolutely. I do not want that dog there. He did not want the other dog there.
Mm.
And so anyway, it kind of, this anticipatory grief and what will happen, what you think will happen, how you think it will happen. Will it happen when I'm on my ski trip or my trip to Italy, or, all of these things? You just never know. And I have had pets die when I was out of town and out of the country, and other people had to handle it. And, this whole regret, and I wasn't there and I should be there for my pet. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. It's going to happen how it's going to happen. So there was that. The other thing I was going to say was, so many people say, and maybe you're getting to this, are you going to get another dog, pet, cat,
Yeah,
iguana?
I
Yeah, you're
actually
probably-
addressed that at the end.
Yeah. And
So,
that
yeah.
to me, that's like asking a smoker, stop smoking, or an alcoholic to stop drinking. It's like the one thing you should never say.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say that like the next day or that hour. It's just
Yeah.
bizarre. But that whole conversation about the next pet, where you've come to this whole conclusion, I can't go through this again. I can't do this again. It's just too hard on me. And then there's the flip side of that, where people will say, well, you're saving another life. There's another animal in a shelter. And the last comment is I had a blind dog. He was 16 and he was blind, and we lost his seeing eye dog. And he could not cope. And much sooner than, everybody, this whole scenario happens in so many different ways, but
Yeah.
that dog needed a seeing eye dog. And so it all just varies. It all is completely variable,
You're right.
how
It's
it
a very-
happens.
You're right. It's a very personal journey throughout all of this, and we're all going to have different experiences based on our own personal histories. And so tonight is obviously just to give you some guidelines, some ideas of ways to approach these things. Not saying you have to at all, but just to give you some tools to try on to prepare yourself as much as possible. There are instances where we lose pets and we don't have the preparation time, and those are really, really hard, I recognize. And that's why, the focus of this was more just on those kind of long-term illnesses.
Erin, we have another question online.
Yeah.
My dog has a lot of anxiety around new people. I don't want his experience to be stressful. And he does for people that he doesn't know that are in his home. So if I choose in-home euthanasia, are there any providers who can build a relationship with pets ahead of time so they don't have that stranger danger stress in their final moments?
Yeah, I love that question. Absolutely. I would reach out personally to some of the home euthanasia providers. Often they want to come in and meet you and meet your pet to establish that relationship. And so going ahead and reaching out to them, even if you're not near that time frame, just to ask questions. What may this look like? What would, can you come out? How frequently? How often? And also, what would it look like of that day? To help prepare your dog with his anxiety for the arrival of strangers, but maybe they wouldn't be as much strangers then. So I would absolutely reach out. There's a question right in the back. Okay, and then we'll get one.
I have an older dog. It's a golden retriever that's 8 and healthy. And I've been thinking about getting a younger dog as a companion, sort of a pet for my dog.
Mhm.
I had an experience with another golden, was about the same age as the one is now. And we picked up a rescue. Well, it was my mother-in-law's dog. She was moving into assisted living. So he took her dog, and that dog ended up living to be 17. My other golden was 15. he had chronic arthritis. And what happened was we had to put him down. And the other dog, within 6 months, developed a really aggressive form of cancer. I mean, it just really traumatized it. So it's kind of a two-part question. Like, if I did get my dog and another dog, what would I be looking for, for the temperament of that animal to try to figure that out, what I would look for, just general signs. And then the other question is, how traumatic is it on a surviving animal that, like this other dog was old, of course, but, how detrimental is it to the other dog's health once its companion is gone?
Yeah, I'll address the second part first. And with the behaviors that I've spoken with, yes, absolutely, pets grieve. They grieve as we do on a different level. They have a different comprehension of death and dying, but they do miss their companions. And so in terms of grief, what you may see are some changes in their eating, some changes in their behaviors, either increased anxiety or withdrawal or hiding, different things you may witness. So continue to pay close attention to those. If you need to involve your veterinarian or with some medication to help them through this period, then engage in those conversations. But yes, I just want to validate that, yeah, they do grieve. I don't know the health component it has on them any more than grief has on us, but I know it can be pretty overwhelming for us. So I could suspect that it could be hard for them as well. Behaviorists recommend to keep routines the same, to not kind of engage them too much that may make them worry, like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And it would be different. But to keep things similar to as it has been, keep their routines just to help get them a bit back on track, can be really helpful to pets. In regards to getting your dog a dog, I got my dog a dog. And so my dog is 5 and I got him an 8-month-old. And it woke him up, right? He has a companion, they wrestle, they sound like dinosaurs. And it just sounds like a brawl in my living room every day. But it does engage him. And so I think really the question would be like, your personality for your golden, being a golden, I think would they be like all welcoming, but what would be good if it would be like a teenage dog or an adult dog or puppy, thinking about kind of what your dog may engage the best with. And so.
My dog is really into people and lesser into other dogs.
Yeah, mine is too. I can relate to that. And so we do have to have separate time. Like I'll take, the bigger dog goes out with me, goes for car rides. So we do have still like our one-on-one time. And just so he knows he's not like forgotten, because the puppy takes a lot of attention. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There was one more question I think we have time for.
Oh, thank you.
And multiple microphones.
Maybe I know the answer to this question, but when you were talking about good days versus bad days.
Yeah.
And having gone through the experience, you can set a goal and say, when the bad days outweigh the good days, then we're
Right.
getting close to that time. But the hard thing that I found was that when they have those good days, it kind of changes your parameters.
Yeah.
So do you have suggestions for, is it setting it more toward the end goal of comfort, whatever? How do you deal with that? Because
Yeah.
it's really hard when they start having good days and you're like,
Oh, maybe tomorrow is going to be a good day.
yeah.
Right. And I think that tool is one that doesn't work as well for me, I will say, personally, because of that. I become very ambiguous. I'm like, well, it's kind of good. Maybe today is good. Maybe tomorrow will be good, and I don't give myself clear answers. For others, I know that they'll define a good day and define a bad day, and it's very objective. And they can track it. It's a tool that works really well with children and helping them comprehend maybe a decline. With that, yes, like I was talking about, allowing for flexibility, right? Because we may set some parameters and say, well, when my dog can't do that, then I think it's time to make a decision. And then if you get to that point, you're like, actually, I can manage this. This is okay. I'm okay with this. But continually assessing where you are with this. Does this still fit in the parameters of quality, Does it still fit within your idea of what you want your pet's life to be experienced as? So if that tool doesn't work, take another one. Absolutely. Don't even think about good days and bad days. If you're like, I'm just going to say they're all wonderful because we're together, that's fine, right? So to take another route. What you're saying may actually be better when I was talking about identifying your regrets. Like, what do I want to avoid? What do I want him not to experience? And are we getting close to that? So if we start to get close to that, then it may be a bit clearer. If you start to see a decline in that direction or that severity. So for me, that works better. Just a thought. Yeah. Well, I can, one more, otherwise I need to continue. I just have a few more slides. Okay,
It's not a question, it's a suggestion.
sure.
Bach flowers are the #1 remedy in Europe. They're easily found. Bach flowers in England is the center. They are for the emotions. You treat yourself and your animal.
Mm.
All you do is put the drops in water. I'm telling you, a lot of this grief and suffering can be balanced out with Bach flowers. And the information is free online. Please look them up.
Thank you. I've not heard of that, so I appreciate it.
You don't make any money on them. That's why American vets never know about them.
Mhm. Okay,
But they're the #1 in England. and
Okay.
all over
okay, thank you. All right. Talking about your grief, we were talking about anticipatory grief, and it's important to recognize that grief is a process. That's why they call it grief work, because it's hard and it's taxing and it's exhausting. And we all may be familiar with like the stages of grief. We may have heard that, right? I like to think of it more as phases, because stages seems very linear and grief is not linear. Grief is very much like this squiggle to where you go up and down and back and forward and around and around and around. And you may not be in one place very long. And that's okay. That's very natural. Grief can be very overwhelming. In our society, grief over pets is quite disenfranchised. We don't get bereavement time when we lose our heart dog or our heart cat. Although we should, because they are family. So it's okay that you grieve over your pets. It may not be celebrated wide, and people may not know what to say, like the lady said earlier. But it's important to recognize within yourself that the grief is real, and it has to be tended to for you to move through it. So just to validate that. And giving yourself permission to grieve this loss is very important. However, that you need to grieve it. Like I said, it's work. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming. We talked about regrets earlier. Regrets lead to guilt. When you're grieving and you're carrying guilt and second guesses and looking in hindsight and saying, I wish I had done that. If only I had done this. You're only saying that because you have a hindsight perspective. Be mindful of that. That can be very detrimental. But the weight of guilt that you're piling on your shoulders can be very hard on you. It can be so heavy. Guilt, I liken to very thick mud, and your feet just get stuck in it. And you're grieving and you want to move forward, but you can't get out of that guilt. And you're just stuck. And so as you start to think of those regrets, this is why I want you to identify those regrets early so we can avoid those and we don't have this extra emotional weight. But instead, when you start to feel guilt, I want you to remember your intentions. Every intention you have for your pet from day one until the final moment has been for their benefit. You have fought for them, you have advocated for them, you've cared for them, you've loved them, you've provided for them. Your intentions have been beautiful. And allowing yourself to let go of guilt, because you're not guilty of anything but loving these animals. Allow for backslides. You may have days where you're like, okay, I'm feeling better. I got through today. I didn't cry. Okay, I got through today, I didn't cry. And you're like, oh my God, and you're just sobbing all day long. That's okay. That's all right. Allow for that. Allow yourself to express that, and then get back on it and move forward more. Be very aware of triggers. These may be habits that you experienced with your animal. Say if you went for walks in a particular park, the next time you go for a walk in that park, it may be very emotional, may be very triggering. Some people may be very triggering of your emotions. You may think you got everything kind of held together, and then someone's like, hey, what happened to, to Lucky? And then you're like, ah, and you just lose yourself. And that can happen. And so being just kind of mindful as you're experiencing things and life anew without your dog in their absence, what kind of may be hard for you. So that way you can think about it. Think about, how will I answer this? Be prepared. Allowing for joy in your life. Sometimes when we're grieving, we think if I'm joyful, that means I don't miss my loved one. And that's so far from the truth. Because what it means is that you love your loved one so much, even through your grief, that you're allowing yourself to feel joy just as you did when they were with you. And that is an honor in their memory, that you're caring for yourself and allowing yourself to live your life. And so allowing yourself the joyful moments, either away from your grief or even within your grief, remembering those funny things that they did that make you laugh, or the times that they made you really mad, and you're like, oh, I can't believe you survived through that. Fine, all the things. This, I think, allows you some grief breaks. Grief is such hard work sometimes that it's important to give yourself a break sometimes. So what that may look like is I'm going to work and I'm going to throw myself into work for this 8 hours. I'm not going to think about everything. And then you walk out of your work and you're like, whew, well, now I'm sad again. And that's okay. You gave yourself a grief break. You got things done. You focused your attention. It also may just be going out with friends or spending time with family and having some joyful moments is a very nice grief break. It doesn't mean that you're done grieving. You may be, but it doesn't mean that you've forgotten your loved one. And to love as you have before, to love your other pets, to love the people that are caring for you, the people that you care for, even when your heart is aching, to allow yourself that emotion. And one thing that's recommended is to be patient with changes and big decisions. If you're like, this is the house we've always shared, I just want to move. I'm gonna put it up for sale. I wouldn't recommend that, maybe not in this market. But give yourself a moment before you really embrace big changes like that. Because emotion can be very driving and very powerful. And so make sure it's for the right reasons, not reactionary. Like I mentioned earlier, we all may be familiar with the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. I actually prefer William Worden's tasks of grief. And there's tasks of mourning. And so he has it kind of in this method. I can read this. When faced with a loss, you're forced to make a choice between two alternatives. You could wallow in despair over what you have lost, wishing what had changed had never changed. Or you could engage with grief, which allows you to adapt and keep moving forward. And it's that adaptation is what we do throughout our grief process. We are adapting to all the changes that have occurred with the loss of this pet, to everything that is different in their absence, our routines, our identity, our efforts, our support. Everything that changes, we have to adapt to. And so it is definitely a process. We start to accept the reality of the loss. Task 2, we start to work through the pain of the grief. Task 3 is adjusting to an environment in which the deceased is missing. All of these take effort and mindfulness and awareness. And then the 4th task is, I find very beautiful, is to find an enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. Recognizing that they are always with you. They are part of your history. You cannot erase them. They're part of every moment for the past however many years that they've been with you. And so they are part of your story. And they will stay with you. And you will still continue to reference them, to talk about them, to share stories. And that's how you redefine that relationship. Some activities to help in kind of the early stages of grief after a loss of a pet, maybe to write an obituary. Some of the practices that we do for our human family members doesn't occur to us to do for our pets, even when our pets are our family members. And so that's why I'm going to say that tonight. Write an obituary. Celebrate their life. Celebrate their story. Tell that. Plan a celebration of life. Invite everyone who knows this animal, right? Everyone who's touched your heart and loved your pet. Writing kind of those favorite memories. So then when your grief becomes overwhelming, you can look back and read some of these favorite memories that can be uplifting you through those emotions. Pictures and like, what is it, Shutterfly, that you can do these picture books, like in this image, can be a great way to kind of gather all those things up and bring you back in time, bring up those memories that maybe you haven't thought of in a long time. Videos I love because I just like the motion of it. You see someone in action. Honoring special days, birthdays, any celebrations that you typically had with your pet, keeping those alive. Talking with someone, support groups, a counselor, whomever it is, a dear friend, clergy, whoever it is that can provide you support to get you through this, to help you so that you don't have to continue to hold the emotions inside your head, but you can start to let them out. And also thinking about what's helped you in the past when you've grieved a loss, either a human or a pet. What has been beneficial? Creating more memorials can be very helpful for some people, just to celebrate kind of what their pet meant to them. This may be something like paw prints. We make clay paw prints of animals at the VTH. We put their names in it, and a lot of families find those very special items to have. Hair clippings, favorite toys, again, those videos or those pictures. And I like little shadow boxes like in this image as well. Some other memorials too is kind of an action, creating a shadow box, again, writing the obituary, planning that celebration of life to really bring forth the positivity and the amazing spirit that your animal had. Planting a tree so that way you can continue to tend to that in their memory, or donating in their honor. I would be remiss if I didn't bring children into this discussion about grief. You all may have young children in your families. And so just wanted to give some ideas of how to involve children with pet loss. What I encourage is to be as direct as possible. Avoid euphemisms. If you've had a young child and you say put to sleep about your pet, then your child may be very, very confused when they go to bed that night. And then after the animal is gone, they may be very scared. And so avoiding those euphemisms, using real words, and being direct with them about using the word died or death. I will say, as a parent who has had these conversations, that is hard. I will recognize that. I applaud you for your bravery to do that. And make sure you take extra care of your own self throughout that conversation, because having these conversations with your children is difficult. Be truthful about the circumstances. Often we, as parents, we want to protect them. We want our kids to not hurt ever. And so we don't want to tell them that they've died, their pet has died. Instead, we may say, well, they went to live with someone else on a farm. And when we create these fabrications, at some point the children will find out, because too many people will likely know and the truth will come out. And then think of how that may be for the child. So just being very truthful allows them to start to process and to ask questions, which may help them in their understanding. Involving them as much as developmentally appropriate within a euthanasia process. Having the doctor explain what's going to happen, allowing the child to ask questions can be very helpful for their just their comprehension based on whatever age they are. I love involving children in memorial ceremonies. They often have beautiful ideas and very creative ones. And so getting their input there. And then also allowing your children to see you grieve. That normalizes it for them so that way grief isn't as scary. It isn't as overwhelming, and they start to see, okay, it's all right. It's normal if I cry because I'm sad. And now I know what sad means. And so they start to put the pieces together when you model that for them. And utilize your resources, your school resources, everybody that is involved with this child, let them know what has happened so that way they can equally support the children. And this was a slide that was the conversation that was brought up earlier about inviting new pets into the home. It is a completely personal choice. I've worked with families that declare, I will never have another pet. I will say it breaks my heart because they have loved someone so deeply that I would love for another pet to experience that, but from them, but it's their choice. I've worked with people that are like, nope, I will get one tomorrow, cannot not have a pet, and everywhere in between. And so if it's a family issue, I would encourage you to involve everybody's opinions and everyone's process. We will all grieve at different rates in different ways because we all have unique relationships with our pets. And so recognizing that some people may be more ready than others and continuing to have these conversations of like, I'm ready, but how do you feel? If someone is like, I'm not ready yet, it's like, okay, well, let's continue to talk, Evaluate the motivation to have a new pet. Some of us want them because they help us heal, give us a direction for our emotions, our love. We feel lost if we don't have anywhere to put that maybe. But some, it may be a reactionary action to say, well, I've never not had a pet, I must have one right now. But they're grieving deeply. And it may not be for the right reason, which may prevent them from really bonding with that pet. And so recognizing what your motivations are. I encourage you to be real about the needs of a new pet and your capacity for care. I say this as someone who, like I said, my dog is 5. He is the perfect dog. He doesn't chew up anything. He has never messed in the house. He is absolutely like perfect. We got an 8-month-old. We have lost 4 remote controls, a door, a kennel, a carpet, some clothes, a tablecloth last week. Yes, the list is growing. I wasn't quite thinking that it would be this hard. And so the energy, if you're like, well, I'm ready for another pet, and maybe this goes to your question. If I'm ready for another pet and my current one is, or the one that I've lost, was very calm and, maybe elderly and, just, didn't require as much, wasn't active. And then you get a puppy, then your energy level in your house may be quite different. And are you ready for that? Some of us are like, nope, I'm getting a puppy. And then we're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. So I just encourage you to think of it. The timing is important emotionally, to recognize that this new puppy or new kitten is a new being with their own personality, and they're going to make their own memories. And are you ready for that? Are you ready to open yourself up to that? I will say, we recognize that this pet is not a replacement. There will never be a replacement for the pet that you've lost. And this one may help you heal. So thinking of that, how will that experience be for you? Do you need more time, or are you ready? Because even if you stick to the same breed, there will be similarities, but there will be vast differences. And I will say, it's okay to sometimes compare, because for you to say to the new puppy, you're like, wow, Buster never did that. Okay. Or, oh, you're such a good dog. What a great trick. You know, he never did that. That's okay. It's all right for you to think of your past pet as you're embarking on a new life with a new one, because they're, like I said, they're there. They're coming on this journey with you, and all the lessons that they've taught you, and all the memories that you've made together, how you've learned how to push the plates back on the counter because there's counter surfers, you know, I mean, all the habits that they form within us. So just be mindful of that as you start to think about inviting new pets into the family. This is what I was saying about your pet's legacy is your story. It's your history. By living on those lessons that they teach us, the mindfulness that they encourage us to have, living in the moment, the joy that they have for life of every day, is how we continue their legacy. We continue our relationship with them. We carry them with us every day from that point forward for all time. I want to thank you for your courage to attend tonight. I realize that I would bet many of you were like, do I go? Do I not go? Do I go? Do I not go? And really may have waffled on that. And so I want to recognize your courage for coming here, sitting through these difficult conversations, starting to try on these things, and being here with one another. Thank you all. Okay. Are there any comments or anything that? All right. Thank you all for attending all of our series. It means a lot for us to be able to give this to you as a way, because it recognizes what amazing pet families you all are. And we love to be able to support you through these challenges. We invite your feedback. I think we send those to you electronically with the presentations. So we'd love to know what suggestions you all may have for another topic, another guest speaker, what topic for them to cover, what you would find engaging and important as you kind of move through this journey with your pets. So thank you all for attending tonight and the other nights. And yeah, that's it.